Welcome to the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show, a broadcast service of globalbusinessnews.net.
This episode from the meeting room of Global TV Talk Show is brought to you by
The Bridge School, the accredited international online private school of choice, at bridgek12.org.
Porch Light Rental and Destination Services. Reduce your renter lump sum or managed relocation costs. Visit them at porchlightrental.com.
Cube Monk, featuring the world's first smart cube. Track your goods with our advanced GPS system. Welcome to the future of moving and relocation at cubemonk.com.
Primestone Partners, featuring corporate, government, and developer housing solutions, as well as senior-level advisory services. Find them at primestonepartners.com.
And by heirs.com. With our full range of services, we can help design and manage your international relocation. Find us at heirs.com.
Insured Nomads provides protection and peace of mind, with health insurance, travel insurance, group, or tailored insurance for the globally mobile. Visit us at insurednomads.com.
And by International Auto Source. We are the vehicle experts for expats, featuring all major brands of automobiles with flexible solutions and financing. On the web at intlauto.com.
This is Ed in San Diego, and this is Global TV Talk Show. This is a news product of globalbusinessnews.net. We've been around since '03. Google Analytics, in their wisdom, if we can believe all that, they say that we've had a little over 1.2 million reader page views on our sites since then, including about 80,000 this past year, 2020. So welcome to 21. This is number 3 in the series of about global talent mobility protocols. What's a protocol? Well, it's a way of doing things. And our leader is Mr. Jeff Houck. Welcome, Jeff. Take it from here.
Good morning, Ed. Good morning, Kirsten. And good morning, Michael.
And welcome all. And we'll be welcoming Mirela when she tunes in. So, Jeff, about protocols, particularly in this new year and this new situation with the pandemic impacting everything, what about outcomes? Take us down that road.
Sure. So, garbage in, garbage out. So you get what you get if you're, and this is where the important part is. So what we've been talking about in the first couple of this series is really that pre-work and the protocols that are in place so that at the end, and what the result is predictive and successful. And I think that's more important now than ever when we are doing so much virtually and we don't have that in-person connection to make sure that our process and protocols are cemented. And what we're looking for, of course, is that predictive piece where we're going to get value from the spend of the assignment. The employee is going to realize success on a personal and professional level, and the business moves forward and meets their objectives.
So this includes measurement of some kind, right?
That's right. And they're on 2 different types of measurements. So Kirsten has already spoken about the success of the business and achieving the goals in a way where it's measurable, a project is completed. But it's also on the people side of things. And that is, were they able to develop, were they able to garner the leadership skills, the social skills, so that they're ready for perhaps a different leadership role or an assignment, so that they're prepared again for another location so that the company has that business. And then I think from a mobility standpoint of, were we successful in all we did? So was the family supported and was the employee supported through that process? So a number of different variables. So the business, that employee and family, and then really mobility, making sure that things flowed the way that they were supposed to.
So we've already talked about assignment objectives and role development and candidate selection. What's hot for today?
Well, we're going to talk about pre-departure and in-location support. So this is finally where the rubber starts to meet the road. We've done our homework with the candidate, and now we want to talk about actually doing things to get the candidate and that family out the door and in location and set them up for success for their assignment.
Great. Hi, Mirela. Welcome.
Thanks, Greg. Glad to be here again.
Great. So, how's your week going?
Not too bad, thank you. How's yours?
Good. Glad it's over. Michael, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Ed. Doing great. It's minus 7 Celsius here, so I've got it better than some others on the panel, but not everyone, not you.
Yeah, right. It's been raining here, but the sun is coming through. So let me ask you, Michael, have you seen an uptick in business?
Yeah. We actually have. This is a very, very fluid situation. We're not at historic volumes by far, but we are seeing an uptick. Governments are struggling with an unknown struggle, I think, to many of the public, and that is they're struggling to get talent to places in their economy, working for the economy at the same time as keeping their citizens healthy. So many people may not know this battle is going on, but it is going on. People are getting into countries still. People are transferring on global assignments, and they're adding to economies. And this immigration is crucial to some countries' economic planning.
So today is January 29, 21. And here in San Diego, also there's an uptick in business. Real estate prices are going through the roof, and it's just getting very expensive. So I don't know how that's going to impact recruitment into the market. I'm sure companies will find a way to get the people they want. So Kirsten, how are you today?
I'm great, thanks. Thanks, Edwin. A little chilly here, but I'm hunkered down inside.
Yeah, great. So from a stakeholder's point of view, you being an HR business partner with a lot to do with oversight or involvement. So, there's in the press, the press is crazy, but they're talking about stakeholder capitalism. In other words, rather than money grubbing capitalism, stakeholder capital. So what do you think about the idea, the phrase of, and this is something that I thought of about an hour ago, stakeholder mobility? How do you see that? Makes sense, doesn't it? Stakeholder mobility. A lot of voices.
Absolutely, it does. I mean, it's no surprise to the people on this panel the sheer cost that is associated with mobility assignments, and really making sure that your investment, you're getting out of your investment what you're putting into it. And so that's why it's really so critical, as we talked about last episode, that the selection is completed appropriately, but then we're also managing the in-country support, the departure planning in a measured way that we understand the cost going in, and we can be really mindful about what we're providing to our staff overseas for them to be successful.
Kirsten, very quickly, off the wall question here. In your history, from your perspective, what percentage would you guess of the C-suite has actually been on an assignment, an international assignment?
From my experience and what I've seen, it's actually probably higher than I would expect to see. Is as you progress more senior levels within an organization, particularly if you're working for an organization that has an international footprint, the ability to get exposure to different areas and different ways of doing business will allow that C-suite to be much more successful. And it's actually quite beneficial, I think, when we come and translate that back down to, let's call it a more regular mobility program for the rank and file employees.
Good, thank you very much. Mirela, could you add to that?
I could, and I was ready to jump in because I have kind of witnessed conversations, and also in a past role, really saw the team responsible for kind of the development of our future leaders think about how the vehicle of global mobility could be used to actually prepare those candidates for a more senior leadership role in terms of perhaps being a country leader or a regional leader. And in that particular organization, they were starting to put the pins in place to actually mandate that before an individual could move into that regional leader or a global CFO position, or an executive vice president with broader geographical responsibility, that they would complete at a minimum 2 expatriate assignments in foreign locations. Meaning that it became evident that some parts of the world business is conducted and the client base and their expectations and demands of an organization's services or products may be very different. And a leader appointed always from the headquarter geography is not necessarily that equipped to understand and to lead that part of the business. So I find it really interesting that there's been a lot more thought about mandating that international exposure and experience as part of the development plan for the future senior C-suite of an organization.
Thank you. Jeff, why don't you take charge here?
Yeah. Okay, so good preamble. Again, talking about the socio piece and the success overall of it. I do want to get back on track with some of the provisional elements that we want to talk about today. These are important, and it's sort of like the what and the why, and it melts in. And the first one we're going to be talking about travel, a little bit about household goods, some housing, schooling, in-country support for the employee and the business, and then some of the home visits and travel back. So some of the provisional elements today. The first one in the box we've got is travel. And what I wanted to bring awareness, as we did with some other items, is in the global world and doing business, things work differently. And we have to keep in our mind that it's not a personal vacation type of situation where we're booking it. We don't do it the same way we do on a personal level. And there's some very good reasons for that. Much of them has to do in this world of a pandemic. We want to be able to know where our employees are. We want to know for the safety and security. So Mirela, I've got you in the hot seat. If you could just talk about some of the reasons and some of the vehicles that you use to support your employees when we're making the travel arrangements and that rationale.
Absolutely. So, I think it's been for many years, I remember kind of struggling with the concept of employees coming forward to say, it's so much cheaper if I book my airline through Expedia on the net. And as a company, it does make sense from a cost perspective, but really what is left out is that duty of care and that control over where your people are, managing that experience, having them book on reliable airlines that have a large fleet that can accommodate cancellation of flights, et cetera. So I think historically, particularly when online travel reservations became an option, a lot of employees, especially those that had a budget to manage, were really trying to maximize those budgets by wanting to push on having their own travel reservation flexibility. A lot of companies have steered away from that and have put in place central global travel reservation systems, whether it be something like an Agencia or an American Express, et cetera. I think this approach is especially critical today because it does give you that reporting capability that if you left your employees to randomly book their own travel reservations that you wouldn't have. It gives you a really good insight if you're trying to prepare for better managing tax and immigration compliance for your business travel population, to actually be able to generate reports from a central travel reservation system to really understand what is your posture, what is your exposure, and how to manage that. I think some of the travel companies have recognized that they provide a really essential mechanism and tool to identify, and they've actually even worked with some of the immigration providers to generate a travel confirmation number, that some due diligence was done in a pre-travel assessment from an immigration perspective before actually finalizing a travel reservation, and also giving managers an opportunity to be involved in that pre-approval process of travel expenses. So I think it is absolutely critical. I think this pandemic in itself has demonstrated how critical it is that we centralize the resources and the tools by which our employees book travel, so that at any point in time, we know where they are. And it gives us that opportunity to use that data to address the compliance issues around immigration and then further around taxation.
Beautiful, Mirela. I'm so happy you brought the compliance in. We are seeing jurisdictions, and it's interesting. Everybody wants a piece of the pie when it comes to a tax. It used to be really where we only had to worry about it on an international. So within various international locations, but we're seeing now even within North America and the U.S. We've got states and state counties that are looking for the revenue generated from activity that's generating revenue within their jurisdiction. So being able to report out on these things and doing the day count, as we're able to through a formal travel program and site, allows us to be diligent and make sure that we're achieving those goals. That's great that you mentioned it. I appreciate it. The next piece I wanted to just touch on, and then we're going to send it off to Michael here, is on household goods, which we could talk about, and maybe Mirela, after I'd say my little piece, you could chime in on. It's one of those things where it always was, where we moved household goods across with the assignment and all those effects for the employee. My former employer, we moved away from that. You get furnished and you have a small shipment instead of dragging stuff all around the world, or putting it in containers that aren't going to be used. But more importantly, of the what you're shipping, it's how you're protecting it. And there's PPI, and that's that personal and property insurance. We've got to make sure that that's in place. So it's the property insurance for employees, but also it's that personal insurance for them that has to be in place, which is sometimes overlooked. Your own household insurance wouldn't typically cover that. And so that's something that the corporate, through their RMC or their insurer, would have to have in place to make sure that in the event there is a loss in transit or in location, that employee is kept whole and taken care of.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Jeff. And it's interesting because it does depend on the nature of the organization as to who the expat or the transferee is. And that really transforms into, are they traveling light or are they traveling with a 10,000 square foot home of belongings?
Right.
And I have seen a shift in people really wanting to reduce the amount of the household goods shipment, putting more into storage, which poses a challenge in itself too, particularly for those longer term assignments. And if they have a back-to-back assignment, it could be that the family returns to home base 5, 6, 7 years later. And often it's the case that whatever they put in storage are items that they don't even want to own anymore. They no longer suit their personal design styles, the new home that they're acquiring upon repatriation. So it's interesting to see that a lot have just wanting to dispose more of personal belongings and travel really light. Also, again, if we're thinking about a much younger demographic of that expat or transferee, they tend to, some of them come out of mom and dad's basement and really don't own very much. So I think a lot of the household goods companies, and Michael could probably speak more to this, have really adjusted and provided a variety of different shipping and moving vehicles, and not the 10,000 foot container and so on and so forth. I mean, I think things are shifting and moving to adapt to a very different profile of an individual that may just be traveling very light.
Agreed, indeed. So we're not moving anything. So Michael, can you find us a place that's got some furniture in it?
Yeah, sure. So when we think about, I will say also there is a movement afoot amongst millennials on the housing front, on the household goods move front, is that they're actually getting rid of all furniture. they're getting rid of all furniture and they're buying new furniture. We're giving them links to Leon's and Structube and the Brick, and they're buying new furniture when they arrive with their relocation allowance, which causes tax related issues. But yes, definitely we're seeing smaller containerization of goods right across the board. When it comes to housing, what will happen? So a destination service provider is highly recommended for the search for housing in the new location. A housing budget comes down from the RMC or from the corporation directly as to what suits what appropriate budget there may be. This generally has been produced by a cost of living study organization. We may stress test that figure that's come out of the cost of living organization. We may stress test it with the destination service provider because markets are fluid. They can change a little faster than the data coming out from the cost of living provider. But we do a little stress test and say, yep, nope, that 3,800 USD is still sound figure. So now we say, is it a sound figure for all properties? I will say, and Jeff has seen this too, and I think Mirela too, Kirsten, there are still a number of companies that use real estate companies and realtors to find properties. It is not recommended in the course of an international relocation. Real estate agents can severely limit market options. They may be working for the landlord depending on jurisdiction. And working with the destination service provider, make sure that you see all the market. And that market might mean working with 5 different realtors, not just one. That market may mean working with no realtors because that entire marketplace is putting their properties up on Facebook Marketplace. So it really behooves you to work with a destination service provider. And the other thing I would say is the destination service provider, while they're searching for that property, they're also putting it in a bigger context. They're putting it in the schooling context. They're putting it in the community needs context, the work-related commute, the budgets that have already been given. So they are working on your behalf as they're out there. They are not limited by geography. Not every expat community in the world is invented identically. Some are better than others. Some are equal but different. Some are very community based. That might be correct for the family. Some might have nicer housing and nicer amenities, but do not have as much of a community feel. You need a destination service provider to take in your interests and your needs and make sure that you're finding the right location. And then in North America, where there really aren't any expat communities, you need this kind of wide angle lens on your home search, particularly. So then when a property is selected, in terms of furnished, unfurnished, it depends where you go in the marketplace into the world. In many locations, furnished does dominate, particularly in expat communities. The landlords are used to this behavior. But if you go into other marketplaces, such as many cities across North America, these properties come unfurnished, at which point you either choose to send over the goods or you choose to rent furniture for the duration of the assignment, which is also possible, and your destination service provider can organize that. Okay, so we found our community, we love our community, we found our home. Now we get into the setup, the lease. We got to help you out with the lease. And again, don't love realtors on this. They may have other goals in mind for the landlord, but in particular, the destination service provider understands relocation. They're looking for the clauses that could cause you problems in year 1 or year 2 or year 3 of an assignment, and they're taking them out and so on and so forth. They're making sure that the lease term is appropriate for the marketplace, but also appropriate for the company. And the security of that assignee. Finally, they may be putting diplomatic clauses. into the lease. They may be putting diplomatic clauses that allow the employee to get out of the lease with 2 to 3 months notice if they're relocated again, no matter how much time is left on the lease. So they could be doing that for you. Now, I will say it's important to note that diplomatic clauses don't work in every location. They may be jurisdictionally not applicable, and also in hot markets. In summer of 2018 in Toronto, there were 10 people lining up and bidding for a downtown condominium, and if you were the only one with a diplomatic clause, you weren't getting that apartment. So the DSP has to work within the confines of the marketplace. And
so Michael, in the case of a diplomatic clause, that could come with a price. In other words, it's not a grab and run kind of a deal. The lessor or the owner will get some kind of compensation, right?
Yeah, they'll get compensation, but it's usually negotiated at 2 to 3 months rent only, whereas contractually without the clause they may have been allowed for the full year or for 2 years. So it really does depend on the jurisdiction.
I think some of that, when we're doing this corporately, some of the risk is mitigated by the leaser in the fact that the costing does reflect that up front on a monthly basis. So everybody apprises themselves of the risk and the opportunities to exit that lease. So there is obviously, a cost appreciated that. Michael, can you talk a little bit about rationale for corporate signing versus employee signing a lease in location?
Yeah, and it does depend heavily on marketplace as to what the landlords are used to. But from a corporate perspective, you've got the situation where the tenant is occupying the property, and they are responsible if dilapidations occur. But if the corporation is on it, it adds a sense of authenticity and authority to the process, where the landlord feels confident that they are going to get their payment rather than someone who's just come into the country for the first time.
And it often, from a tax perspective, it often keeps it much cleaner if it's the corporation, and then does not affect that employee personally, which is always a consideration.
That's very true. I very often come across tax providers who will say, in this jurisdiction, it does not matter. But even though it doesn't matter in this jurisdiction, if it's the employee paying or the corporation paying, we would prefer it be the corporation paying because it's just that much tighter a line.
And Jeff, what I would also add is that I've seen companies saying, look, but we're not prepared to take over and manage the lease and do that directly with the landlords, but we're looking for the RMC to help us with facilitating those payments so that it never becomes a cash flow issue from the employee where they have to advance the funds, submit for reimbursement, wait for that to come through, particularly for candidates that are coming from low income countries. If we think about, resources from places like India, I mean, their annual salary barely covers 2 months of rent. So, companies are really looking a little deeper into this area and thinking, how do we make this a little bit more feasible and possible for our expat population, understanding that not everybody has thousands of dollars available to make those monthly payments and then later be reimbursed.
Terrific point. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael, that was a really good explanation. Thank you.
Then the final one is the most boring one of all, so I'll hit it hard. It's the admin. Security deposits. The destination service provider or the RMC can turn around money very quickly. That's their job. We call it fire hall accounting. But some of these security deposits in North America are needed within 48 hours, 72 hours, that sort of thing. In some locations in the world, you might have, the destination service provider might have negotiated certain work to be done in a kitchen or in a bathroom or with air conditioning that hasn't been done, and that landlord won't start that work until they've received their security deposit. And with the globalization of accounting in large firms, a lot of these firms can no longer get money out in 72 hours notice to secure that lease. So that's kind of the final step that a destination services provider will bring, or an RMC.
Michael, I had a couple of situations where there were some issues related to credit in the host country of an individual
Sure.
who just didn't have credit cards. And I know that the destination service provider and RMC were extremely helpful in helping to mitigate that, where essentially, the landlord would do that credit check and it identified that the
Yep.
individual didn't have any credit history in that particular country. They couldn't get a credit card. So can you tell me whether or not that was just a unique experience for me, or are you seeing that being more common than not?
Well, we have to do it all the time. There is absolutely no question about it. First of all, the fact that they're represented, and I mean, this is the underwritten rule, a bit of an underwritten hero of using a destination service provider. It's actually brings a lot of cachet. It brings a lot of cachet with that person, that person is not just walking up the street themselves. They're not using a realtor. They're being represented by a destination service provider, that an employer has gone to that length to give them that service. So it starts off the relationship at a steady footing. And also we can bring to them the notion that, by the way, next year when the person goes home, we might be a source of future tenants. But we're very often working directly with the human resources to provide employment letters that satisfy landlords, and even though that the people do not have credit.
Thanks, Michael. I've got you moving on to schools now, and so
I'm sick of hearing of me.
we're going to talk about it a little bit. And I think, we're talking about schools, and Michael's going to dig into this. It's such an important piece for families, and it's a deciding factor, in fact, on if that family often is going to go on the assignment. Parents are concerned that their children's continuation will not be interrupted. And we really want to see if they're going to invest in the international assignment, really the outcome for their children should in fact give them a leg up. And that should really be an outcome of this. And so, Michael, how do we go about placing our kids in some of these schools?
Yeah, I'll double down on what you said, Jeff. This is often the most important element of someone's consideration of an assignment. It's often more important than their housing. And that's saying a lot, because housing is really housing in the community is really important to people, but they'll often make a compromise on their housing so that they can get the correct schooling. So it can't be said enough that education of the children is a major preoccupation. They know they're dislocating them and they want them to land right. So at a very high level, a destination service provider works closely with family to research suitable options. For public and private schools, check availability, registration requirements. They will schedule the interviews. They will assist with enrollment documentation if it's foreign to them. And a destination service provider, in all of this context that they're doing, they are intimate with the schooling options. They have intimate knowledge in the schooling options. They do not examine the child from a psychoeducational point of view. I do want to make that clear. That can be necessary in some cases, but in many cases, the destination services company, who is really reviewing the educational requirements of the child, that is satisfactory to most families. And it starts with education needs assessment. So every destination service provider should start with an education needs assessment. Who is your child? What are their interests? What's their academic standing? What is their history in schooling? What are their longer term goals? What type of community are you looking for in a school? Are there special needs? That comes up an awful lot. What do you want from your education program? Is it STEM, or is it the arts, or is it a both? It comes right down to the social aspect. How are my kids going to get integrated into the school? Is there a parent community? That can even come up. So we really are doing this education needs assessment to really understand what community the school has to fall in. After we've done that assessment, we're also making sure that they bring all documentation. Nothing worse than finding your school and not having the correct documentation and not enrolling in time. So we make sure that can happen. After the needs assessment, The destination services provider then provides the employee with a customized education report, and it's containing all kinds of information on public-private options that meet their needs, grade determination, international schools where available, enrollment processes, requirements, so on and so forth. And the provider will provide the employee with assistance identifying the school, the numbers of schools to visit, it might be 2 to 3, attending at those visits where necessary, and particularly where there might be language barriers. And again, just like expat communities are not all built the same, international schools and private schools are not all built the same. So it was really important that we did that educational assessment to find out what the family needs, looking at the school as a community, not just to educate their child, but to educate their child down the right path that they want to be educated, and also be a good community for them as well. They might book school appointments, they might book school board appointments, that can also occur. They are there for the registration, the final registration and the final enrollment. That is all being done. And again, even with interviews, the destination service provider may be along for those interviews, asking questions that the parents neglect to ask. So it's really soup to nuts. As I said, there was that high level, we assess them, we give them a game plan, and then we start working that game plan onto the individual schools that meet their needs. The one thing that needs to be said about North America in particular, but it can happen also in other jurisdictions, is if the public school option is appropriate for the individual, we should be finding a multiplicity of schools. Because if you come to Calgary on any given day and you're going into the public system and you believe the public system and these 3 schools have handle English as a second language very well based on what the destination service provider said, there may not be a rental in one of those catchment areas. So we have to manage expectations and have a listing of schools that meet their children needs and rank them 1, 2, 3, because at the time of their landing, they just simply may not be a property in that catchment area.
Something that's really neat is that the Bridge School partners with various organizations to provide learning for their students. For example, we partner with a major ballet company, and we are able to enroll several of their students into our school. So now not only is the student able to participate in a school and have a seamless transition while they're very active in their ballet career, but now they have other dancers that are with them that are doing some of the same courses. So it's almost becoming a camaraderie where they're taking similar courses, they're working together on their ballet, and really being able to form this great partnership with these organizations to provide a needed service. A lot of times there are student athletes who will spend hours and hours at the gym or at the basketball courts, wherever it is. And if they're attending a traditional school, they're in school from 8 to 3. They get a quick snack, and then they're at the gym for 3 to 4 hours in the evening. Coming to us and having that partnership, they're able to break that up throughout the day. They can have a morning practice, get some schooling in, have an afternoon practice, finish their schooling in the evening. So there's that flexibility. And additionally, if there are tournaments or performances, it's fantastic because if there's a week where they have shows straight through, they can take that week off of learning and then pick back up when they're done. So it offers this great flexibility. And for the program owners of these sports leagues, it is a win-win situation for them because they see this need. They see this need that their students need to make sure that they are obtaining the grades necessary to be successful adults in our country and in other countries. But it provides them an environment where they can be successful at both.
Michael, this is really interesting. I had no idea how deep you went.
Jeff will say I'm not deep at all.
I Bang. I want to just, I just wanted to also call about, Kirsten, you'll recall some situations we had, and Mirela, you do this, timing of the deposit for enrollment. People are often surprised about this. Sometimes before you've even committed to a school, the organization or the corporation will be asked to be writing a sizable deposit if it is an international school that may or may not be partially refundable. And this is months ahead. And that is to secure a spot for the children in these schools. It's high dollars, but it's not uncommon that you're writing checks for this months in advance. So that's something that people need to understand is common.
Yeah, there can be debentures, even if you're not being accepted this year into that school, you could be putting in a debenture for following years.
Sure. Thank you for the explanation, Michael. It was nice and deep. I do appreciate it. I want to go into now a blended support model here. And that's really for the cadence and the process that is used for the continued success of the business while supporting the employee. And that's while the employee is on assignment. We want to make sure that they're kept in the fold of the company, being recognized and acknowledged. And Kirsten, I'd like you to take it from the business perspective and speak to what is necessary and how that's achieved through the business.
Thanks, Jeff. Absolutely. I think it's one of the things that probably gets easily forgotten is when you send somebody over on assignment, you're sort of out of sight, out of mind. And that can have a real devastating impact on the engagement of the individual, as well as their successful reintegration back home. So some things that we ensured to put in place or maintain while someone is on assignment is that they're still treated as an employee within that home country structure. So we are continuing to share information as we regularly would with that employee. They're continuing to follow the, if it's a Canadian home country, you're continuing to follow the Canadian HR cadence around salary increases, performance management, reviews and discussions, and they have that connection back home still, so that they don't feel necessarily as isolated as they would in the foreign assignment country. What I've always advocated for is to have a business representative within their group back home, act almost as a buddy or of sorts, to maintain conversation with them, let them know what's happening in the office, let them know what's happening back home, and that they have a regular touch point, monthly, semi-monthly, whatever makes the most sense to keep that person engaged.
So Kirsten, is there, so they're supporting the employee in that regard. Your job as a business partner, you need to support management as well to make sure they're doing their part. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. So it's really continuing to ensure that management understands that those are still employees under their fold. They still have direct authority and oversight over the work that's being done. And what are they doing to continue to engage those individuals, and whether it's a team or an individual that's located on assignment somewhere, how are they ensuring that they're being kept in the loop? And something as simple as time zone changes can be devastating on an individual to try and stay connected. If your management team meetings are always at 8 a.m. on a Monday morning, and that translates to 3 a.m. for the person that's impacted by the relocation, they're not going to feel engaged, nor are they going to feel very well looked after, for lack of better terms.
I think, thank you for the business piece. It is important. Lessons learned, of course. I wanted to move, and I'll start it off, and then Mirela, I know that you've got experience in this. It's really now that socio engagement with the employee and their family. My past experience, I found one of a good way to keep on this is certainly making sure that there's that immediate and the immediate need piece, which is more tactical perhaps, with the DSP available to them, so that they can reach out if there's something strange or uncertainty, they've actually got a go-to in country. But I think importantly as well is making sure that they're looked at psychologically. And in the past, we have kept on our psychologist who did the initial assessment because they know where they were going off and the jumping on point. And they actually offer engagement on a monthly basis so that that employee and or the family can be asked or speak to any concerns that may arise or maybe anticipated, to make sure that we address these in a very timely manner. I'm wondering, Mirela, if you could speak to some of those.
Yeah, definitely, Jeff. And I think really to piggyback off what Kirsten has said, I think it really comes with, first of all, them feeling that they're still remain connected, particularly at the onset of their assignment. They're really struggling to make those connections, to build those relationships, both in the workplace and outside, to feel supported and have someone to speak to. So very quickly, the DSP or the relocation consultant becomes their best friend. And I think as more companies are thinking about how critical it is to keep that connection both in the home and the host, one of the things that I had proposed, that a role be created of a sort of an expat resource manager that is an HR person that really is there to help support that individual through all aspects, not just simply integrating from a performance perspective in the host country, remaining fully connected to the home country, but also addressing some of those more sensitive and personal HR issues and sensitivities, having those regular monthly calls with that person that understands them, know where they are in their transition, and can pick up on some of those cues in those conversations to say, something's not feeling right or sounding right. I think something's going on there. We need to dig a little deeper. We need to continue to evaluate this person's needs, particularly in the first 6 to 12 months of their repatriation. So I think there are a lot of tools and resources available, the employee assistance programs that are always available that are often overlooked. A lot of the organizations, if we think of like the Cignas and the Aetnas of the world that provide the medical on-site benefits and support, do have a lot of resources also available to address all kinds of mental health issues, stress management, in some cases, addiction that develops during the term of the assignment, marriage breakdown. So there really are a lot of resources, and what's really important is that there is that single point of contact even within the organization from an HR perspective to really manage those resources alongside with destination service provider or the relocation management consultant to make sure that really there is an overarching support mechanism and system in place to address any of the challenges and the issues that may be coming up for that particular individual.
So Mirela, is this explained to the transferee and family in advance, or only when it comes up?
I think that, the challenge is a lot of companies are recognizing the need to kind of formalize this. I think historically it's been done very informally. People become assignment buddies and a source of a sounding board or someone to contact. But I think as this is really formalized, my guidance would be is that this support and this service is one of the first things that's shared as the individual is actually making the decisions around, do I want to take this assignment? So I think it's really important that they understand that these resources are available. They're going to be provided. That ongoing relationship and touch base with the home country, host country, HR partners is absolutely really critical. So I think, have we all done it right in the past? No, I think a lot of companies are starting to think through that and make it available. And I think it's really important to continue through technology. I mean, I think about developing global mobility communications on a going basis, having a global mobility wiki or intranet site where you make available all this information, not in a way that specifically highlights a particular individual that may be challenged, but invite them to a community where you as the employer continuously provide information and resources about all kinds of things that are available to them to help them manage whatever issue they may be dealing with at that particular time.
I think it's important, Mirela, and this is, so it's available to these. I think, Kirsten, you would concur. One of our lessons learned when Kirsten and I worked together on an assignment was, in fact, the lack of engagement when these resources are offered is just as large a flag as someone engaging these resources. So if they've gone in and they're not engaging the resources that are available to them, and they're becoming insular and somewhat detached, we really need to do course correction on that as well. And it's a very good canary to understand and be able to understand what they are, how their experience is, and how they're coping, in knowing that they're engaged along the way.
And Jeff, I mean, I think one of the things that I take great ownership of is doing a pulse check on how are things going, and not doing that just surveying the vendors as they just finishing providing a particular service, but reaching out to that population on an annual basis. And I called it voice of the customer, and really having a conversation and getting away from that written survey when you ask them 10 questions to rate a service or their policy of 1 to 5, but really saying, how are you doing? What's going on? And it's really interesting because in those conversations, they may reminisce about something that happened, when they first set out, but they give you a lot more insight as to what they're addressing and what they're dealing with now, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years into their assignment. So I think we all need to take that ownership as program owners, to really engage ourselves and just not leave it to those, not very formal surveys that really don't give you any insight of what's happening with the person.
We live with everything else in real time now. And so, when we're talking of a survey that's based on, you're talking annual, I mean, even quarterly, if we're dealing everything else real time, we need to be much better at attaching ourselves to this, so that we can at least write anything that might be going off the rails and just be cognizant of it. All of this has to do with achieving our ROI. So we need to be invested in this just as the employee and the business is invested as well.
I think a lot of the RMCs have recognized that it's really important to do that check-in along the lifespan of the assignment with their population that they're supporting on behalf of the client. And a lot of them within their technology have created these informal, like, how you doing? It's a thumbs up, it's a neutral, or a thumbs down. And, if people consistently are giving you the thumbs down, but they're not disclosing any information, that warrants that being, the corporate client being alerted. Something's going on with Jeff. It's been 3 months in a row. He's given us a thumbs down. He hasn't given us any information. He's neglected to pick up the phone and call. You might want to check in on him and see what's going. So I think that technology has also developed to be able to do those regular check-ins in a pretty non-invasive way. And the technology is now developed so that you can do it on your smartphone. You could do it as a text. So there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of ways that we can stay in touch to really check in on how things are really going.
Excellent.
When we, in a couple of my past experiences, where we're building a team of individuals to go to a foreign location, part of that planning and budgetary setup was to allow for myself as the HR business partner to travel in country on a regular basis, to really have that in person, see what they're seeing, experience what they're experiencing, so that I could really translate any issues that I was seeing live back to the home country. And make sure that we are managing and supporting our teams as needed. I mean, an example that came to mind is we had a team in Spain, and they're all located very centrally within downtown, kind of core central Spain. Yet where they worked was, I think, Jeff, if you recall, probably an hour plus commute. And without really being live in that environment and experiencing that and understanding what the impact was to them, it made it hard. We were hard pressed to really come up with solutions and get at what what their concerns were.
Kirsten, you just, something flashed before my eyes as you were saying that, because one of the first things I did when trying to understand what the landscape was like and what were the issues, particularly in Hong Kong, is on my first trip there, I organized a destination services appointment. I did the city orientation tour. I went and I visited a number of schools, but what was most helpful was understanding what you get for $10,000 a month US in rent. And it was a huge eye opener for me in terms of empathizing and sympathizing with the expats who were saying, look, my $10,000 budget isn't going to get me very much. And until you actually are on the ground and you see, you really can't make smart decisions about policy development, about levels of provisions and dollars being offered, or truly empathize with the challenges that they're facing. And I remember a gentleman bringing to mind saying, where are my kids going to ride their bike? I mean, they're used to living in middle America. They ride their bikes up and down the street. We've got 3 parks within, 400 meters of where we are, and there's pavement everywhere. I'm struggling, and it's not typical for little kids to be riding their tricycles in, city center Hong Kong. So you raise a really valuable point about how important it is, not just from a business partner perspective, but from a mobility leader to really understand what they're experiencing and see it and live it firsthand.
I think this all goes back on the ROI really. And when we're talking about a trip where GM and the HRBP goes over and really gets the lay of the land and understanding it, the investment in that is so minuscule compared to the landscape of the cost of the actual assignment for one assignment even. And I believe that that is part of our role to, as part of the education and really understanding how we can, so positively affect the outcome of something that we're looking for. With that engagement piece, and just backtracking a little bit, I wanted to speak of the importance where most programs, if not all, should have a cadence for a home visit, for that reconnection for the employees and their families, and how important it is in my mind, and I want to get your opinion on this, Mirela, is that the home visit provision is available for the families and the employees, and how important it is for them to actually use it as a home visit. So come back to where they're based out of, and not as some organizations say, oh, just use it as a holiday and go to ballet or somewhere else. It's just the importance of that connecting piece.
So based on my experience, Jeff, it's absolutely critical that the dollars allocated for home visits are spent on the home visits to the extent that I actually changed policy to indicate that they're reimbursable with receipt with a flight back to home. Because historically, the experience was that the individual used that budget to world trot around the world, or that part of the world that they're in, to enjoy vacations in Bali, which is absolutely lovely. But it defeats the purpose and the intent of the home visit, which ties a lot to continuing to have that relationship with the business, with the HR partner, with the business managers, anticipating that at some point upon repatriation, they need to be reintegrated back into the home country business. And I have experienced many circumstances where they'd been gone for so many years that there were no relationships maintained in the home country, that it was absolutely difficult, and in some cases impossible, to actually secure a role at the end of that assignment and in the home country. And that really translated into an unfortunate separation from the organization, because they were done what they had set out to do for 4 years abroad. There was no role to fulfill back in the home country. They lost track of the last 3 managers that they would have been aligned to. They had no relationship with local HR partners. And so I am a strong believer that the home leave, the return back to the home country is critical, not just a personal perspective, but from a business perspective. And it ensures that, the $2 million that have been spent on that individual don't walk out the door because there is just no role to return to, because they've not maintained. And really, I think it's really important for us to preface what is the intent of this home trip. We get it. It's visit family and friends, have a little vacation. But my expectation is that we share that they need to come back to the office. They need to have those meetings. They need to have those conversations. And about a year prior to their anticipated repatriation dates, they need to start planning and be part of that search for their next role.
So the business partner's job, right? I mean, whose job is it?
I would argue that it's a joint responsibility. You need to advocate for yourself. You need to take charge of your own career. You need to talk about what it is that you've accomplished and what do you want to do. I've seen situations where the role that they left 4 years ago can become available to them upon return, and the HR partner may think, I've done a good job, I've got a spot for them to come back to, but it's not where they want to be. They've gained 4 years of experience internationally, and there has to be a lot of work to understand where did they want to go, where do they see their next role, and it's a partnership between the individual, the HR partner, and their home and host country business managers to make that happen. And that's when I say, we need that runway of at least a year to really start planning for that, because think about it's a senior level person. SVP roles don't come and go every single day. So it's absolutely critical that one, you take charge of that, you advocate for yourself. And if your business structure is not such where you've got an allocated resource manager or an HR partner that handles the international team or the international staff, that you get in there, you make phone calls, you start conversations. My experience, when that is not in place, what happens is that candidate is knocking on the door of the global mobility leader saying, I'm due to repatriate in 2 months. Nobody's talked to me. Where am I going? And when that has happened, there was nowhere to go. They repatriate and they're severed. And all of that investment is to the benefit of their next employer.
Right. So we're going to go into that, of course, on repatriation in the next one. But it is so great, Mirela, to frame the importance of that. It's that physical connectivity, which all of us are dying for at this point in time. And I think all of us during the pandemic, when we're doing so much virtually, can really understand the poignancy of this, how being in that physical space and being included in decisions that are going to impact you and being engaged are so important. So nice strong end on the home visit piece, and certainly appreciate it. Before we go, Ed, we're going to close out. Next time we are going to be talking about coming back to the homeland, and that's going to be a little bit of work with Mirela and I, because we're going to have to do some logistics. Michael's going to have to help too. And then Kirsten, she's got a big job set out for her because she's got to do all sorts of good business planning. So
we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot today. It's been an education for me, that's for sure. And the apparent role of the business partner has become stark because we see there's a communications link and a role of just oversight, as well as almost like an ambassadorial role that HRBPs can play.
Absolutely. It's a great way of tying the ROI back to the success of the project, is having us, along with Global Mobility, engaged throughout that whole process. Okay,
Jeffrey, thank you so much. Michael, Deane, you're like an amazing resource, and that is really a deep dive in the reality check. And Mirela, your perspective is, of course, the lead. So thanks. So let's say goodbye and have a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
have a good
Pleasure.
day.
Bye-bye.
Ciao. Bye.
Thank you for joining us in the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show.
Have a wonderful day, and stay safe.